and welcome. Well, g'day folks. Thanks so much for dropping into the Helium Down Under channel. If this is your first time watching this YouTube channel, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, tick the little bell so you get notified. My name is Ian and I'm going to be your host for this particular call. Well guys, we've got loads of great information to share in this video today. This video is aimed primarily at the helium, Internet of Things, and with a big focus on those of us that are down under and across the ditch in New Zealand. It's all primarily information that is particularly focused on the AU 915 band of the helium and the Internet of Things. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you probably know what that is. If you're watching this video from elsewhere in the world, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to us. You probably want to listen to our funny voices with our strange accents. It's just great to have you all here. Do me a favor as well. We like to spread this information, get it out there wide and far across this great land of ours. So if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button as well for the video, because it will help the YouTube algorithm to boost our rating and make sure that it gets out there to more people. All right, before we get to the crux of tonight's call, we've got a special guest which I'm so excited for you to hear this person's story. But before we do that, let's check out the map of Australia and New Zealand. What's happening right now in the world of helium? And here we are on the map of Australia. Look at this big, beautiful country of ours. Well, folks, if you've been tuning in recently, you will have noticed that there are clusters starting to grow in all areas. The latest area of Australia, which is really starting to grab hold, is over here in Perth, also down here in Melbourne, and a splattering up here in Brisbane. But guys, as I have mentioned with all of our calls, if you are watching this video before you order your hotspot, please guys, at the time of this recording, Bobcat do not produce a unit which can legally operate in the Australian area. It's a different frequency band, in variance anyway. They use the US 915, we use AU 915. They're very similar, but they're not the same. So if you're watching this before you order them, please don't order Bobcats unless you happen to be watching this a long time after recording, and still just verify that they are making units for Australia. Because at the moment, about 50% of the lights that are lit up on our map are in fact Bobcats. Doesn't mean they don't work, just makes them not legal. Not a good thing. All right, but without further ado, I think it's time to bring on our guest. This gentleman is the owner of the very first Helium Hotspot that operates on the AU 915 band. He turned on the very, very first hotspot. So without further ado, let's bring him into the call. Jay Smith, all the way from sunny South Australia, the city of churches, and the owner of Jumping Corduroy Dolphin, the #1 hotspot in Australia. How are you, Jay?
Good morning, Ian. Yeah, I'm doing not so bad actually. It's a pretty good day here down in Adelaide, and I will have to probably jump in and correct you. There were a couple of hotspots operating in Australia before my Jumping Corduroy Dolphin. However, they were special gateways that were set up by Helium themselves for a special OPEN network, part of part of the Helium network that was a special case. So I was very fortunate to get in early and get a hotspot delivered to me by Nebra. I was a couple in that delivery, and I was really happy to receive them here.
Fantastic, mate. It was so exciting, because I'm sure, like many of us here in Australia, the fact that I have a YouTube channel and I'm also one of the moderators on the Facebook early adopters page, I field a lot of questions from a lot of people. And like myself, when I first saw helium, I'm looking at this great opportunity to establish an Internet of Things network and to leverage, whilst I'm building that, actually earn some fantastic cryptocurrency income, which hopefully in turn will produce a great income that can improve my life. But when you look at the big map of Australia, there's not much there compared to the US and the likes.
Very true. Yeah. I remember looking at it myself going back 6 months ago, and that was even more so. There was actually two green lights on in Australia at that time, and it was quite depressing. And I would petition CalChip over and over again for an AU 915 version, and at that time they were struggling with keeping up with the Northern Hemisphere orders, so they weren't giving me much time. So it was glad to see now that there's a variety coming online, and most states are represented as well.
Yeah, fantastic. It's just awesome to see, mate. Well, what I'm going to do here, Jay, is we're going to zoom in on Adelaide, so we can have a look at your network that you've got building down there, because at the moment, as it currently stands, whilst there are networks starting to appear across the country, regardless if they're Bobcats or not, yours is the only cluster which at the time of recording that is actually working as we would hope that it would work, is that it's got the proof of coverage, that your hotspots are beaconing, and there's your units are witnessing, and everything's ticking along. So let's zoom in on Adelaide, and you can tell us on what you've got set up down there. All right, Jay, well, here we are. We're in your little part of the town, the city of churches, Adelaide, and you've got the 3 hotspots here. How'd you like to tell us, mate, what's happening in Adelaide?
That's correct. So in Adelaide, the first hotspot, being the one on the left of the map, is Jumping Corduroy Dolphin, and that one is actually at where I live, at my home. It runs a 3 dBi antenna. I picked that mainly because it's in the CBD of Adelaide, and I wanted the coverage to be quite strong up close, and I want Adelaide to be very strongly covered. And as to the one just to the right of it, that one there is it's the little zinc jellyfish. So that one there actually is set up in the same way, and both of them are set up quite high. One's on an 8-meter mast antenna at my home, and the other one is on top of a building which is probably about 10 meters or maybe even 12 meters off the ground, and so they're decent height in both of those 3 dBi antennas, and they should get good coverage, at least they have with the tests that I've done. And then the third one, being quite some distance away, it's at 12 kilometres away, I put an 8 dBi antenna on that, a Taya Glass 8 dBi, which is a very high quality antenna, and it has proven that it works really well. So as you can see, the quaint yellow cottonmouth we have witnesses to its beacons, and they all 3 of them witness each other quite well. But the quaint yellow cottonmouth is very sensitive in its antenna, and it will pick up nodes. I've actually had a node that it's picked up when I've been driving home. That's actually one at my dad's house. So I actually do. That's one of the things I'd like to mention to the community as well, is that in setting up these systems, I actually use nodes to do it. I actually have things like the rack trackers, and I have other types of Dragino node sensors and things that I actually have constantly pinging away. At my home, I have one which has a temperature sensor on it, and it's pinging away. And at my dad's, I have one, and so it's really good to keep. It almost keeps like a heartbeat going. I'm able to see, and if you were to look at my gateways, you're able to look, and you actually see packets transferred. You're actually seeing that there's evidence that it's working fine. On the screen there's packets transferred, and those packets transferred let me know that the gateway is working correctly. And as far as DCs are concerned, which are the unit which we pay for these things, it's costing me microcents to have that heartbeat going. I think the cost of the battery that I eventually, when I need to replace it in my gateway, is probably going to cost more than the packets that transfer. Yeah.
So it's actually talking about sensors and the likes, because my introduction to Helium was through cryptocurrency. But once I actually saw what it was, doing a little bit of research, I love the fact that Helium actually has like a real use case that's physical, that I can sort of see, touch and understand, as opposed to most other cryptocurrency projects. I did actually purchase myself this, which I at this point had not unwrapped. I don't. Yes, you can see it in there. It is the Helium Developer Kit. Is this the sort of thing that you started with as far as your sensors, or did you purchase commercially made sensors?
Very similar to that. I put together some sensors myself. The very first sensor I ever purchased was a tracker unit, which was it was a rack tracker. Actually, I've got it here, right here. It was this one here, which was a rack tracker unit, and I'm trying to remember the number of it. I think it's either a 5200 or something like that. I can't remember the exact model number of it, but it is essentially it's a printed circuit board which you have to kind of attach a battery to, and you do have to do a little bit of programming. You have to connect it to your computer, and you do have to open up a terminal and do some configuration parameters. But it's not too bad to configure once you read the manual. That was my first one, but I have many since then. I have Dragino ones, which you can do all sorts of customizations to. You can add different types of sensors, and I've got some that are doing weight sensing and some that are doing temperature sensing. And then I've got the little NetVox, which is one where you press a button on the side and it sends a ping out, so you can walk around. I use that as a mapping tool, and there's all sorts of sensors that you can buy. And I was introduced to Helium essentially through the need of a better coverage, because I was working with the TTN network. And for those that don't know what that acronym stands for, it's the Things Network. It is another LoRa network that operates off of the goodwill, essentially, of the community. There is a commercial side to it as well, on the commercial sense, but the costs to enter that are quite high. So for me, the community version of the TTN was my starting point into what they call LoRa. And a lot of people probably noticed that I never actually call the Helium hotspots or gateways miners, because my take on it is essentially they're primarily a LoRa gateway, and secondary, they earn cryptocurrency. I like to think of that's their way that they kind of pay their keep or earn their keep. And I know the general community probably looks at it more like, oh, they're a thing that makes me money, and they also provide some coverage. But I tend to flip that around the other way for myself. But.
Yeah, well, I look, it's like many things in life, isn't it? People come in, discover things, whether it be sports or all sorts of activities. You find new things in your life through different channels, and in this case here, we've got a merging of a technology. We've got merging with two technologies. We've got blockchain and crypto. Well, actually, almost three. You've got blockchain, you've got cryptocurrency, and you've got the Internet of Things, all sort of merging here onto one. It's awesome to have you, Jay, sort of as part of the community, because the information that you have is, I expect, quite thin on the ground, especially over here in Australia, when it comes to the Internet of Things and the true usage of the network. There will be many cryptocurrency experts and maybe blockchain experts, but there won't be a lot that understand the sensors and the like. So, mate, it's just awesome to have it here. I'm interested to go back a little bit to talk about your setup, because obviously right now you have, well, for starters, when did you order your hotspots? How the heck did you get your hotspots when we're all waiting, Jay? Have you got some special connection?
Absolutely not. But I was, considering the length of time Helium's been around, I was pretty early in on the scene, especially when it came to ordering AU 915 versions. I was waiting at 3 a.m. in the morning when Nebra first came online, and I hit the buy button, I think, seconds after they actually went live. So that was in February, back in February this year. So in batch one, I was on the Shopify. Their Shopify order number was 1023. So
you were number 23 in the network.
I was number 23. I still, even though I was there with poised to buy, And one of the reasons I was poised to buy was because I've actually been following helium since November last year.
Okay.
So I was talking, and I was in contact with helium staff as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd had a teleconference with a couple of members, and we talked about getting helium running in Australia. Mm-hmm. And they'd said to me they were trying everything they could to get hardware down here. Yes. But at the time, the only supplier was Calchip, and they could not devote any energy to that when they had such supply issues going on in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
So that I didn't have a special contact to get anything, but I was very early in regards to them coming online.
I could just see you at, was that 3 o'clock in the morning local time in South Australia?
Yeah.
I could just see you there correct. With your sleepy eyes ready to hit the buy button. So
I was.
That's what I call a true pioneer. That is the true pioneering spirit. And those of us in the network here in Australia, Jay, we will leverage off your expertise many times, I'm sure, through this journey. Now, we were talking earlier on about beaconing and the process of how it all works. Could you spend a couple of minutes just explaining how, maybe just let's look at it from, let's imagine that I have a unit that's here in Australia right now, it's in Brisbane, and how my unit talks in with yours and how it all actually, how it all communicates backwards and forwards, and where any problems might be in our network as it exists at the moment.
Sure thing, Ian. So I'll first start with a caveat that my knowledge of this is gleaned through what I've read and what I've heard. And whilst I think I know a lot about it, I may not have it 100% correct. But to the best of my knowledge, the way that it works is that a gateway somewhere will issue a challenge to a hotspot somewhere else on the network. And that they can be in different countries, anywhere in the world. And that challenge causes that other gateway to send out a beacon. Mm-hmm. And that beacon is a LoRa beaconing for your radio. And any other gateways that happen to hear that beacon will then report back to the challenger that they heard that beacon. Okay. And then that becomes the transaction, a successful transaction. Mm-hmm. And as some of us may be aware, that there are cases of where we feel we should have gotten a successful witness, event, and that should have been a successful one, or we should have gotten more witnesses than we did. And part of the reason why these witnessing events can sometimes fail is because there is latency in the network. And that latency can be caused by a number of factors. Remembering that with computers, they have to send messages to each other within a certain amount of time for them to be considered acceptable. Mm-hmm. They only give that a certain amount of time to have that witnessing event to happen.
Okay.
And so things like intercontinental firewalls can add latency to a network. But the primary one that a lot of people point out is a relayed hotspot. If a hotspot is being relayed, especially if the challenger is relayed, then that will cause all sorts of slowness in the response coming back, because a relay generally has to talk through another intermediary gateway. It can't have anything talk back to it generally, to itself. It has to do it through a proxy.
Okay.
And that introduces latency. So the enemy of the helium network is latency, really. And that's why we get these events. And a lot of these sorts of problems are hopefully going to be solved with the second stage of the validators coming online.
Agreed.
Because when they come online, the first stage being they do the consensus, which is just making sure that the transactions are valid and be added to the blockchain. But the second stage is that they will be the ones that will be issuing the challenges. So the latency between these very fast computers that are usually sitting in data centers with very fast internet connection is much, much lower.
Okay.
And that hopefully is going to solve these problems that we have with beacons that don't get witnesses, essentially.
Well, look, I know that out there within the Helium community as a whole, Jay, I'm sure like myself, we frequent the Discord channel. We're both reasonably active on the Facebook channels. So people are raising concerns about the whole validators reducing the amount of HNT that a person can earn. Now, you also have a title of not only the first hotspot on the map in Australia, what are you also the only person in Australia to have achieved so far, and may potentially be the only person to ever achieve that title?
Yeah, and so the quaint yellow cottonmouth did make it into the consensus group, and that is quite an achievement when there's 70,000 gateways on the network at the moment. For those that don't actually know what the consensus group actually is, it's a small group of gateways that are randomly chosen around every epoch, about an hour or so. And I think there's 15 of them. I can't be quite sure on that, but it's around 16, that amount.
16
validators, that's right,
in each epoch.
That's it. And so you haven't got a lot of chance of making it into that, but the rewards are quite high when you do. So I was very fortunate out of these tiny amount of gateways to actually make it into that, and I was quite pleased and chuffed when I did.
I won't torment people by showing them your earnings for one day of what you earned, but yes, you do earn very well when you become part of the consensus group. But the consensus is on the way out, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I want to probably say to people, though, I fluked it. I was really lucky. Yeah. The chances of actually getting into that are so small that I wouldn't be concerned about the fact that the consensus is going away to the validators and those types of things. It's not where, I guess, you get your earnings and of your hotspot from predominantly. Most people generally get it just through good placement and good antenna placement, making sure that you get that coverage out there. If you've got gateways nearby within 3 or so kilometres, a good antenna placement will make all the difference.
Totally. And it's actually fantastic that hearing how your setup is in Adelaide, because it actually replicates what I'm recommending to people, I guess, because a lot of people reach out to myself, just like I'm sure there's probably been many people reach out to you. Once you become involved in some sort of social media, people look to you as an information source. And I see myself, and Jay, what do you feel? The antenna that is on the top of a hotspot, those little plastic or rubber ducky type antennas, do you see that they really have any place in providing a great network of coverage and producing what most people are looking for with good proof of coverage?
I'd have to say that in most cases, no. But there are cases in which I think they will serve the purpose well, and that is if you're living in a high-rise apartment block. If you're having a gateway by the window in a high-rise apartment block or somewhere, you're not going to do any better by putting a fantastic outdoor antenna on your gateway, because you've already got the height advantage, and that is what they always talk about is height. If you want the best antenna placement, you want to try get it up high, above the roof line, especially. And that's the only reason that the indoor antenna isn't actually that great, is because it's on a spot, which isn't above the roof line.
Which is sitting inside your house.
Otherwise, it would be fine. So you need to use an outdoor antenna for the reason of getting the antenna above the roof line. And I always say to people, if you're going to run cable to do that, then run high quality LMR 400 cable with N-type connectors. Try to keep those runs as short as you can, but don't panic too much if it's going to be a 5-meter run. I know some people kind of they're worried about the 0.01 of a dBi that they're going to lose by having an extra meter of LMR 400. I don't think that's a bigger issue. You're actually better off getting a metre higher
Yes.
and losing that 0.1 of a dBi than you are, or whatever it is, than actually saying, no, I'm going to go shorter and have my antenna not above the roof line.
It's a joy to listen to somebody that sees the world exactly the way you see it. It is so good.
Yeah, it's being pragmatic about the approach as well. I mean, you don't want to put 30-foot masts up without guy wires. You want to stick within the legal limits of those types of things. You don't want to be silly about the things and put up crazy structures to try and get, your antenna high. Be reasonable about it and put it in a sensible position, and you'll do well.
Yeah, it's actually... Of course, like most YouTube videos that you watch, folks, neither Jay or myself are financial experts, as far as spending money or investing money into Helium Hotspots or gateways. Guys, always make sure that you only invest what you can afford to lose, because whilst right now, I'm sure Jay thinks the same as me, we have an opportunity here to become something that is absolutely huge in this Internet of Things, creating a true decentralized people's network across the country, which taps into this global network. But who knows what tomorrow is going to bring, and the money that you spend today may return zero. So, or never invest what you can't. And with your hardware, exactly as Jay said, work within your limitations. A little bit of something here just to write down on your notepad, folks, and I'm not going to say that this is consistent across the country. All I will say is that here in Queensland, it seems to be pretty consistent across most of the city councils, is that you can place an antenna 1.5 metres above your roof line, and that is within council regulations, and you don't need any special permits to do that. Essentially, it's a TV antenna. If you look around your area and you see TV antennas 1.5 metres above the roof line, I guarantee they don't have permits. And likewise, they don't have guy wires. It's when you're wanting to put big masts up, you've got to do it right. If they fall down, somebody's going to be liable, and if it's your mast, it's going to be you. My mast at my house will have guy wires. At the moment, the mast is anchored to the wall. It does actually have a full specs diagram with it. And before I do fully erect it, I am going to have to comply with council regulations. So the guy wires and everything will need to be in place. So, guys, it's good to do ad hoc, and it's good to shove your antenna as high in the air as you can, but make sure you do follow any local laws and regulations. And neither Jay or I are experts on those across this wide, wonderful world that we're in.
One thing I did want to mention as well is that try to make your antennas follow a plan according to what you want to witness. There's no point in going out and buying a 9 dBi, or some people even go crazy 15 dBi Yagi antennas to try and cover the local area around them, where they've said that they've got 5 hotspots around them, and that, really you want to try and cover as much as you can in regards to the local area, unless you're placed a long way out from the city or from somewhere where there are other spots, in which case then you can raise your dBi of your antenna. My 2 hotspots in the city, like I was saying, are running 3 dBi, because I know that there's going to be lots of other ones around that are close by. And the one that's much further out is running an 8 dBi, but that is a long way out. It's not going to be witnessing anything closer than probably 4 or 5 kilometres at the minimum. So I've deliberately chosen a higher dBi for that purpose.
And what heights are those antennas again? Sorry, Jay. What your 3 dBi?
All 3 of them are around 8 metres or so. All of them are around that height from ground. One of them might be a bit higher, maybe 10 metres. But because we need to remember that when you go up in dBi, you go down in your direction. The direction it points is high. It's more accurate. It's more focused. And in doing that, you can actually lose. You can overshoot. You actually hear that quite a lot in the Discord forums, where people have gone for very high dBi antennas and they've overshot the gateways that are nearby them. right around them for many kilometres, in fact, because they just go over the top of them. Yeah.
And I suppose that's particularly relevant if you've got elevation. I've actually got 3 antennas that I will be experimenting with. I have a 3 dBi antenna, which is not here yet. They're arriving with my Nebra units. They were Nebra 3 dBi antennas. I currently have 3 5.8 dBi antennas, which I purchased from Rack, and I have one 8 dBi antenna that I also purchased from Rack. And in my location where I am, I already have fantastic elevation. But I will be experimenting with each of them so that it just really, I suppose, becomes a learning tool for other people. Because I fully expect, exactly as you've said, Jay, is if I throw the 8 dBi antenna on the roof, that my own local network that is maybe within 2 or 3 kilometers of where I live, given that I'm on a hill, is essentially is like a torch. If you've got one of the torches with the zoom in lenses, if you zoom it out because you want to see the possum that's in the tree on the other side of the road, it doesn't do anything to light the potholes that are 2 or 3 feet in front of you. Whereas if you...
It's exactly like that.
Yeah.
It's exactly, that's probably one of the best analogies I've ever heard of it, is exactly like the zooming focus on a torch.
Yeah.
You lose your width and your ability to see wide for the expense of seeing long, and that's...
There is an application that I did here that was one of the other on another YouTube channel, and for the life of me, I can't think of who it is, but whoever it is, I'll link them in the Discord, in the comments to give them the benefit of this. He was talking about having an 8 dBi antenna mounted on the top of a city building. And my feedback initially to him through the comments was, that's fantastic, but I just want to point out that you're going to be missing all of the units in the city. He actually did a follow-up comment on one of his other videos, sort of addressing that, and I could see the relevance behind it. I'm not sure in practice how it will work, but in theory I can understand. Is he's part of a city that has got a large number of hotspots, and if you are familiar at all with how proof of coverage works, the amount of H&T that you earn is proportional to the rating that those hotspots have, and when you've got more hotspots clustered into an area, and we'll do a whole video on this at some point.
So what you're talking here about, Ian, is the HIP 17 reward scale.
Absolutely, the reward scale, exactly.
And that does come into play. In some ways, it kind of incentivizes witnessing hotspots that are not in very tight clusters that are quite sparse. It rewards that higher. And
so actually hitting the suburbs, if you're up in the middle of a city, the likelihood is the reward scale because of HIP 17 is going to be low in the city. Whereas if you can bypass all of those people by using that laser focus of an 8 or a 9 dBi, you could potentially reach to the outer suburbs where people actually have a much higher reward scale because they're not as packed in. In theory, I can see that it would work. I'm not entirely sure in practice that it will work as well as what we would think it would work in on paper.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I suppose there's more evidence of anything like that in the other countries of where they've got density and those sorts of things, and only time will tell for us. Sure. I would have to say too is that at the moment we're running POC version 10, which does make a difference as well. Like I get invalid witnesses as well because the DBI is too high on my cottonmouth one, quaint yellow cottonmouth, because some of the hotspots the gateway in the city that I have is seeing it as being unpractically high signal. The signal is not believably high, believably low enough. So POC V11 is going to solve that issue, they believe. But because it takes into account the DBI of the antenna. Okay. Whereas currently the POX doesn't take into account. It expects everybody to be running the same type of antenna.
Oh, I didn't realise that. That must be, as I've missed that one. Because I have realised that it's probably also something to take on board is that quite often if you have got an invalid witness, whilst at the moment for all of us here in Australia, it's not much of a concern because we don't have many to work with. But in the US and Europe and the likes, and our network as it grows, you may be missing, it will show up on your activity that you have a witness that should in theory be talking to you, but it's marked as invalid by the system. And would it be reasonable to assume, Jay, that that's because the system is seeing that you could be, is that somebody in that little equation there is manipulating the system and essentially they're not being truthful in some way?
So then what they are, they're known as anti-gaming measures. So early on not even early on, it's sort of in the middle of the helium sort of time, around September last year, there was a lot of activity on the network with gaming. People that were putting hotspots in just one room and saying that they were in other places by their assertion, a location, and gaming the system to earn all these rewards for no coverage. And that was when not only did HIP 17 and HIP 15 come into place, but there was a whole lot of effort around anti-gaming. And there are some of those anti-gaming measures aren't really known. They're part of the helium sort of stuff. But one of the ones that is very well known is obviously that a witness that has a too higher RSSI or basically when your RSSI is out of bounds. So there's a map you can actually see where it expects that if your signal to noise ratio is this and your RSSI this, then that's believable for the distance that you essentially are away from that gateway that's witnessing. And if it's not believable, then it comes up as an invalid witness. And if you start raising your DBI, but you're still pretty close, you'll get those as invalid witnesses, in which I have in one of my cases. And the POC V11 is as an amendment to be able to make that adjustable via the type of antenna that you're running as well. It adds that into the equation.
Will that require you, Jay? I know that in recent times that a part of the setup was to identify what antenna you're using and the height that I think it is. I believe they were both optional bits of information. Is that part of that improvement that you're just talking about?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's it. It's not required right now. It won't make a difference, but very soon it will come into play and it will make a difference.
Okay, great. So it pays to have the correct information in there so that some of those invalid witnesses may in fact be deemed to be valid because they will take into account the fact that you're using an 8 dBi antenna mounted at 10 meters. It becomes believable all of a sudden.
Correct. And that's what I can't wait for it, because there's one particular situation where mine comes up as invalid.
I'm sure there will be many more for both of us, mate, as we continue to grow our network. Jay, you mentioned before about the length of cable running to your antenna. So you've got 10 meters height. I know that I'm going to be running potentially up to 15 meters. That can be a lot of cable that we're looking to go here. What's the solution as far as that you can see to overcome that? And also, what are the drawbacks potentially of doing that?
Yes. So in my case, I've moved the hotspots themselves outside, even though they are internal gateways and they were never internal ones. I have put them in an exterior enclosure, to a waterproof enclosure, to get them closer and not have to run the antenna cable quite as far. This has brought about some things I've had to compromise with in regards to heat is an important one. In summer, it gets hotter outside, especially in Australia. So you have to. So that's one of the reasons why I took the lid off of whatever. I took the top off of it. It's not as drastic as a lot of people see it. When they see the photo of it, they go, "Oh, you pulled your Nebra apart and all that." What I did was I just took the lid off, really, and I put a bigger heatsink on it.
You're talking about your outdoor units and your antenna set up there a moment ago.
Yeah.
I know you're really super active on Discord, but a lot of our people that are viewing this YouTube channel won't be part of the Discord channel, the Discord community.
Sure.
Is there any possibility that I could ask you to share some photos and information that you might have on our Facebook Australian Early Adopters page, and maybe you can throw a post on there with whatever information you're happy to share? Would you mind doing that over the coming days?
Sure thing, I will do, and hopefully some people can glean some good information from that.
Yeah, totally. Because I know I did see the photos of your unit with the lid off, and when I saw it on Discord, I actually think I sent you a message saying, "Oh my God, how brave are you ripping the guts out of your hotspot? What happens if it breaks?" Only to find out that all you actually had done is remove the lid. It just looks scarier than what it was.
That's correct. And I put a different heat sink on it. That was one thing I did notice, that the heat sink on the Nebras is relative on what I would consider the small side.
Yes.
I'm sure it's sufficient indoors, but when outdoors, I just didn't think on a 40-degree Australian summer day it was going to cut it. So, and I also put some moisture absorbing units in there as well, because being outside, the chances of getting moisture inside even a waterproof container is there. And I put some moisture absorber in there as well.
I know that your units are actually currently outside, up in their elevated positions, so probably not super easy to take photos of now. But anything that you can share with the community via the Facebook Early Adopters, mate, we can glean all sorts of information from your experiences.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, I'd recommend also for us Australians to try and keep them out of the sun, even if you've got it on some sort of a mast or something, even if you had some sort of a metal reflector above it, just to give it some shelter in that midday sun.
Sure.
Reflect the direct sunlight off of the enclosure itself, because it just if it gets hot, these CPUs that we run in these things, they throttle. The Raspberry Pi computers are designed to keep running even when they're hot, but they just slow down and they run a lot slower. So that can cause problems, obviously, with how it's working.
That's actually been raised because as you've probably seen on YouTube, I've got a couple of my other videos looking at my outdoor unit and my off-grid system. And the two questions that I get more than anything is, what about the heat buildup, and what about lightning arresters? Yeah. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are about lightning arresters, but to be honest, before I ran CB radios for a decade, and I had antennas up in all sorts of weird and wonderful places. And I got to tell you, I'd never ever thought about lightning arresters. All of a sudden, it becomes something that I've just got to do otherwise. So I'm a bit of a noob when it comes to lightning protection, but it's something I do have to look into a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I do run the lightning arresters mainly because the hardware that's on the other end is hard to get, hard to replace.
Very true. Very true.
If it was something where I could just go down to the local electronics shop and buy another one, I probably, because in Australia we don't have also the sorts of problems that they have also in some of those areas in the Northern Hemisphere of a lot of lightning. We don't, in South Australia especially, have that bigger problem with it. But I still put them on anyway, because I just thought, well, if it did happen to take it out, I'd then have to wait 6 months for a gateway. And I don't want to have to do that.
I can just see that when my unit gets hit by lightning, and I'm going to have all these people sending me comments going, "I told you so."
One thing that I just did recently with one of my units was I originally had it set up to use Wi-Fi and just use Wi-Fi back to the house. And I actually did a power over Ethernet conversion to it. And that was just a matter of running an Ethernet cable from the house router and putting a power over Ethernet injector. And that puts power into the same piece of cable as the network runs. And then at the other end in the box, I put what's called a splitter, and that takes the power out and splits it out into network and power to the Nebra unit. And doing that, I think, is giving that a much more stable internet connection.
Yeah.
It's going to, I mean, it wasn't bad. I can't say it was bad, but I'd have to advise anyone that's building a new setup to look at trying to go with Ethernet over Wi-Fi if you can.
Yeah.
You know, it's not always possible. One of my units runs on Wi-Fi. But the other two run on Ethernet because they can. It was possible, and doing that conversion, I think, has made that gateway run better. I actually think it runs better because of it.
So, all right, Jay. Well, listen, mate. Thank you so much for being here today. Look, I don't know about anybody else, but I've got an enormous amount out of listening to you for the day. I've got a feeling that there are going to be a lot of questions that people still do have, that even after doing their own research and watching a few clips and reading materials, they're still going to have questions. But how about if people leave those comments, if you've got a question about anything that you can't immediately answer for yourself, put a comment in the video, leave a comment in the social media channel, wherever you're seeing this, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Discord, whether it's on Facebook, wherever you're seeing this video, leave a comment. And between Jay and myself, we'll go and we'll collate those and we'll come back. And Jay, how would you be about doing a video part 2 in, say, a month's time, mate, once the validators have bedded themselves in and we've got a few more people on the Australian network?
That would be fantastic, Ian. I'm really looking forward to actually seeing some of the questions from the community. And yeah, I'm really stoked about this network and the way it's coming. And now that Australia is becoming, you know, on the map, and it's really happening. And I look forward to talking to you in a few weeks' time.
So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Really did appreciate it, mate. I will look forward to seeing you on the call. Folks, as I say, if you've been listening to this video all the way through and you got to this point, congratulations. You're already one of the few people that do watch things right to the end. Smash us a like, okay? Give us a like. Make sure that you show us that you've appreciated what we're giving you. We don't get paid. We're not being sponsored. This is a way of being able to share information for the community to help you, to help yourself. Leave your comments if you've got them. Make sure you're subscribed. Follow us. Follow me on Twitter. Join the early adopters on Facebook. If you're on Discord, by all means, shoot me a friend request. But I'm happy to engage with anybody. But just remember that Jay and I are only we're individuals with a life. We don't sit there all day just answering questions. So with that, guys, thanks so much. We'll look forward to seeing you all on the next Helium Down Under call. Have a good day.